Playa Frans was so full of life, we actually ran out of music in the sea life sections, so we're including a few more of them here. This juvenile trumpet fish couldn't have been more than 6 inches long. We also saw very hungry stoplight, princess, and queen parrotfishes. A French angelfish caught our eye, as did a golden-tail moray eel. And the reef. From pencil and lettuce coral to some beautiful red encrusting sponge. We can't wait to show you even more. Let's just get past this opening. Playa Frans is the most remote dive site we've profiled on Bonaire so far. As of this recording, Washington's Loch-By National Park is still closed for diving, but we hope to dive in there someday, at which point those will be even further. To be sure, it's quite a drive. It can take up to an hour from Krylendijk, and even longer on the way back because you have to drive through Rincon. We'll show you that experience in the site logistics section. But for now, another important piece of information is that there is no cell service. If you happen to get into any car trouble, it's a very long, very hot walk back to civilization. That said, while it certainly isn't a popular spot, we've never been here during the day and not seen at least one other car over the course of a few hours. Plan accordingly, and you should be fine. Now that the scary stuff is out of the way, let's take a look at why you should consider visiting Playa Frans while you're on Bonaire. It's not only beautiful underwater, the entire area is just as picturesque on land. In fact, it's one of the best sites on the island to bring your non-diving friends while you go under. Across the parking area, there is a fairly large salt pan that is home to a number of local birds, including flamingos and herons. Actually, the first birds you'll probably see are chickens roaming the grounds. Other land animals we've seen in abundance are lizards and, closer to shore, crabs. There are a number of interesting succulents around, and several buildings that are used by local fishermen. While the beach is mostly rocky, there is some sand, all of which leads to extensive shallows that are perfect for snorkeling. The shallows go out almost 300 feet from shore in some spots, and are dotted with a few sandy pools that are between 6 and 12 feet deep. The seafloor in the shallows is chock full of rocks, coral debris, small reef structures, and there's some very nice elkhorn coral out there. We've seen turtles, lettuce leaf slugs, banded butterfly fish, and juveniles can often be seen swimming around the tops of coral heads. But Playa Frans has its share of uncommon sea life as well. We had 2 first-time captures here, including a yellow-lined flatworm during the day and an Atlantic bird squid at night. We'll show longer clips later, but if you want to learn more about some of the uncommon animals shown in this video, check out the description below for links to additional information. And before we move on to the site logistics section, consider this a brief video surface interval. While you're waiting around for the next section to start, maybe kill a few seconds by subscribing to the TropicLens channel, clicking the like button, or if you really feel ambitious, leave us a comment. Either way, it's all good. It would just be a little better with some love. Thanks! Smiley face. Playa Frans is way up on the northwestern side of Bonaire. It's a bit of a trek, but we'll show you what to expect. Head north from Krijlendijk on Kaya Gobernander Nicholas de Braat for approximately 4.7 miles. The name changes to Boulevard Gobernander Nicholas de Braat along the way, and turns inland for about 2 miles of that, but eventually you'll get back to the coast. When you see water again, the road turns right and also changes names again to Queen's Highway. Follow that for 3.5 miles. Be aware that once you pass 1,000 steps, Queen's Highway becomes a one-way street going north. When you return back from Playa Frans, you'll have to travel through Rincon. When you reach Carpata, instead of turning right as you would to go to Rincon, turn left and proceed another 1.7 miles to the Bopec facility. You have to drive around Bopec, so turn right and go through the gate. This is where the road gets adventurous. There is a big hill behind the facility, and the road going up and down the hill is paved, but has seen better days. Note that only the up and downhill parts are paved. We assume because climbing and descending such a steep road after some rain would otherwise be rather treacherous. Everything else, all the way up to Playa Frans, is dirt. We should also mention here that just after you pass Bopec is when the cellular signal stops. It's another 4.4 miles from the Bopec entrance, and the drive can be slow going. The road is quite uneven in spots, with lots of deep potholes and long tire ruts. Our GoPro stabilized the video here, but check out how much the truck is bouncing around. Here's what it looks like from the outside. In any case, drive carefully and you shouldn't have any issues. Ultimately, the road ends at Playa Frans. This is the part where we normally recommend Maps.me as an excellent free offline GPS map. It still pulls up Playa Frans, even while in airplane mode, but for this particular site, it's a little wonky. This northern route doesn't exist, so select the one hugging the west coast. Also, trust us, it doesn't take almost 19 hours to get there. Despite those two hiccups, it will successfully track your position all the way there. You can park anywhere on the left. We typically go just beyond this large abandoned building because we think the entrance is a tad easier. The reason for that is it has a narrow, flat stone path that leads to a semi-sandy entrance. The other marked entrance is about 100 feet before the building. That is certainly doable as well. There's just more rocks and coral debris. There aren't any tables or benches, so the best place to set up your gear is at your vehicle. That abandoned building does have a flat area facing the shore, but you'd have to carry your gear down there, and that shallow step just below could make things trickier than they need to be. We do recommend using it as a nice place to sit during a surface interval while looking out over the water. Plus, in the morning and early afternoon, it provides some nice shade. As far as other amenities go, there is a garbage can, a receptacle for depositing any fishing line you may pick up from the reef, and a very colorful bench that also provides a shaded view of the ocean. Once you're geared up, it's a pretty short walk into the water. The shallows have a very gradual slope. In fact, you can likely find a path to walk all the way out to one of the pools when the tide is low. Those pools range between 6 and 12 feet deep and are a great place to don and doff your fins. At the far end of the pools, there is an underwater berm consisting of rocks, chunks of cement, and other debris. Swim out over that for about 50 feet and you'll reach deeper shallows that eventually descend to the drop-off. As noted earlier, Playa Frans is used by fishermen, so there are boats occasionally. Given the water depth, especially at low tide, keep your wits about you whenever you're near the surface. Navigation at Playa Frans can be done in a couple of ways. By compass, the heading out is 245 degrees southwest, which means 65 degrees northeast is your heading to get back to shore. Underwater landmarks are another option. There are lots of unique objects to reference as you dive, like this large, overturned elkhorn coral in 8 feet of water just in front of the entrance. If you're down on the reef, this tire is out front at about 35 feet. Once you clear the underwater berm, you'll see a slightly deeper, but still shallow area with a tremendous amount of sea life. Those shallows start at around 10 feet and slowly descend to about 20 feet where the drop-off really gets going. The drop-off is fairly dramatic and goes well below recreational dive limits. As is the custom here, we'll show you what it looks like down to 100 feet. We haven't experienced that much current here, which isn't to say it doesn't happen. This is our typical experience. Here, our buddy Keith is minimally using his fins to keep up with a school of blue tang. Whenever we dive here, we make sure to spend time in several areas. The first is the sea pool. That deeper area in the shallows is a great spot for exploring, either before you head out or after you return from the reef. The school of blue tang we saw out on the reef swam around the pool on one dive, and this porcupine fish took some time to enjoy the pool as well. We also saw a French grunt on our way back from a night dive. Another feature to investigate lies just beyond the pool area. The shallows have a large number of bommies, or isolated rock and coral formations that rise up from the bottom. Bommies is a term we first heard years ago when we dove in Australia, but we've heard some people use it here as well. All these bommies are in 10 to 15 feet of water, and the sea life just love them. Stick around because we're about to show you what specific sea life you might encounter. We'll start off the sea life section with this beautiful yellow-lined flatworm, which was a first-time capture for us. The pattern was just gorgeous. Kudos to Keith and our group for finding the most colorful flatworm we've seen on Bonaire. Later in that same dive, a fairly large but dispersed school of creel wrasse swam down and explored the reef with us. They may be permanent residents, as we saw a second mass creel wrasse encounter about 6 weeks later. Another schooling fish we saw across multiple dives here was blue tang. They were near the drop-off, and they were in the shallows. This one was pretty cool. We caught a spotted spiny lobster hanging out on the ceiling under a ledge. What was interesting was all that movement in back. Upon closer inspection, it was aerating eggs. Look for the orange blob toward the end of the tail. In addition to the ever-present brown chromis, there is a remarkable amount of sea life at Playa Frans. Here are just a few examples of what you might see if you decide to make the drive. Given how remote Playa Frans is, my buddy, Sid from Go With Yo Diving, drove separately, just to have some redundancy in case something happened on the way back to civilization at night. I also brought a couple of these highly reflective belts that hang around trees or rocks so that we could easily spot our exit point in the dark, although they were clearly not needed. Anyway, let's get to the diving. Remember the coral debris covering the shallows during the day? Well, it is just covered with assorted juveniles at night, using all the nooks and crannies for protection. We're not going to show the whole clip, but it goes on for almost a minute and shows non-stop activity all along the bottom. We also saw quite a few lionfish roaming around, likely due to its isolated location and relatively few divers hunting. If you have an elf and taste for lionfish, this might be a great place to catch dinner. Spotted spiny lobsters were also in abundance, although they are not for hunting. We saw over a half dozen of them on our night dive. The biggest highlight we'll share was this very friendly Atlantic bird squid. It was a first-time capture for us, so we stuck with it for a few minutes before moving on to other subjects. But it was not to be ignored and just kept popping by. A few minutes later, we spotted this juvenile fish and noticed the squid was watching from a few feet away. It actually photobombed these two sculptured slipper lobsters, but we circled back to them because we don't see pairs that often. All in all, it stayed with us for almost half an hour. The first clip was when we were out near the drop-off, and this one was from the pool area where we removed our fins. It was super curious and made several close passes, so we got to see some of the spectacular color changes up close. Squid are incredible animals. We saw a community of spiny flower coral during the day, and found it again at night with some tentacles out for feeding. Then we wondered if it glowed. Turns out it does. Here is that same spiny flower coral community under purple light with a yellow filter. This combination of light and filters is called fluorodiving, and is a fun, unique way to see the reef in a whole new light. To be sure, our night dive at Playa Frans was full of fascinating sea life. We'll stop talking and turn the music up a bit for the rest. Enjoy.